So we'll start at 5:05 so we can just give the others a chance to join us. All right. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and start, and then maybe as people join us, I can just let them in. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn about the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Program, which is, known as RCIP. And then we'll also be covering the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, or the OINP Employer Job Offer Streams today. My name is Angela Verzosa, and I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I'm also the owner and managing director of AV Immigration. My colleague right here, Mary Eugenio Igochi, is also an RCIC, and she's also the owner and the managing director of Ubuntu Immigration Consulting. So she will be presenting the first part of our program or agenda for today. So both Mary and I were both active members of the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants, who's the official regulatory board that issues licenses for immigration consultants like us. Okay, so for today, again, we'll use the first 40 minutes to cover the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Program, care of Mary. And then the next 40 minutes, I'll take it on for the OINP job offer streams. And then we'll use the rest of the time to answer any of your questions. We'll focus more today on the standard eligibility criteria to provide information. But of course, if you want a personalized discussion about your case, you can always reach out to myself or to Mary for some personalized consultation. Okay, so I'll give the floor now to Mary so she can go ahead and cover the first part of our today's agenda. Go ahead, Mary.
Could you make me a host so I can share my screen? Okay. I'm just going to share my screen right now. So share. I'm just trying to make it bigger. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, it looks good, Mary.
Okay. So I'll be talking today about the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Program. So I'm just going to be in between accepting people. And if you see my eyes this way, I'm just looking at my other screen. So pardon me. I'll be talking about the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Program for Sault Ste. Marie. And yeah, so my name is Mary Eugenio Igochi, as my colleague Angela said. I'm the owner and founder of Ubuntu Worldwide Immigration Consulting, Inc. I'm also the registered social worker in Ontario. I moved to Canada just like most of you did in 2019. I came as a student. I did the BSW program at Algoma University. So I've been in the Sioux all my life since I came to Canada. I've worked mainly with newcomers. I've worked with the Career Center. So all my work experience in Canada have been with newcomer immigrant population. The last role I did was with the city where I was with the LEAP. I was the LEAP coordinator and largely participated in the RCIP program. So RNAP program then. So really vast with the whole RNAP program and how it works. And I became a Canadian citizen in July 2024 last year. So my immigration journey is done and it was put to a stop. So here is what I'll be talking about. So this is focused on Sault Ste. Marie. As we know, there are 14 communities participating in the RC program. Sault Ste. Marie is one of those 14 communities. So this is really Sault Ste. Marie specific. We're talking about the community NOCs priority. We're talking about designated employers in Sault Ste. Marie, work experience and who is exempted. We'll be talking about education, language proficiency, ties to community, and then what's next after you've gotten your recommendation from Sault Ste. Marie. I'm just going to check if anybody's in the room. Okay. So with RCIP, RCC for all communities, RCC really said because of the way immigration is going with the caps, so RCC is really reducing on caps. And for all communities, they were to identify 5 priority sectors. So all the participating community. For the past RNAP, they had 10 sectors, but this time around, they had to split it into half. So for Sault Ste. Marie, we identified health, education, law and social, community and government services, sales and service, trades, transport, and manufacturing and utility. So these are the areas in high demand where we need economic growth in Sault Ste. Marie. And for the year 2025, we have 300 slots for Sault Ste. Marie. So these are the lists of the priority NOCS. Also, giving sectors are 25. IRCC also asks communities to identify. Giving sectors are 5. IRCC asks community to identify 25 sectors. That is priority NOCS jobs that are eligible, because when you look at sectors, healthcare is really broad. It has like over how many occupations. So this is more like narrow down, where do we need the need? Do we need the need in nurses? Do we need the need in do we have need for PSW? Do we have need for practical nurses? So this is more narrowed down to suit the demography in Sault Ste. Marie and our growing needs as a community. So as you can see, so if your NOC is not here, you wouldn't be eligible for the RCIP in Sault Ste. Marie. For each community is different. As I said, it's based on the need of each community, right? So we have nurses, we have engineering, we have trades, we have aircraft. And then for some sectors we still need, but it's kind of like capped. So for the food service supervisor, this is only restricted to dine-ins and restaurants. So if you're doing fast food like Tim Hortons, sadly, you would not qualify because this is just narrowed down to hotels and dine-ins only. And then it's capped at 10. So they are good. RCIP will be issuing 10 recommendation in this particular NOC. And this 10 recommendation, as an employer, you can only get 2. So let's say, for example, you're working in Roadhouse trucks. That way you can just only put 2 employees. And then for the whole year 2025, people that work in hotel and dining can only, like 10 of them can only get into RCIP. Then for guest service supervisor, this is only 10. And then for security guard supervisor, we have 20. So for the whole of 2025, just only 20. And this will be off the selection grid. So people with the highest score, people who, first come, first serve, and people that have the highest score, those are people that the city will pick out for this sector. Other than that, other NOCs are not capped. Like, an employer can decide to put 20 if he has 20 applicants. So far, he put it in time. Other areas are not capped. So the intake with the Sault Ste. Marie RCIP, this time around, people are not just submitting their application. So there is a time where you can submit and then there is a window. There's a time where you can submit and then it closes. So the first intake just launched, that was midnight that's Monday 27th, right? And then closing May 10th. So in between April 27 and May 25, that's where the recommendation committee will sit down and decide who are they selecting So after you're done grading, the committee will sit down and decide, okay, is this applicant, are we giving recommendation to this based on your application? I'll talk about the requirements. So there are 8 intakes in the year of 2025, and then you just need to know when you can put in your application and then be mindful of the time deadline. So the list of designated employers. So this is as of today. So far, we have, I think, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we have 8 employers on the city website. I don't know if that's been updated lately because the list just keeps growing, right? Like employers are still doing their training. They are still trying to, get in touch with the city, present all the documentation needed, document from CRA, a lot of things, and the city is yet to get back to some employers. So if your employer is not on the list, please don't be worried. Know that they are really on top of things. It's just like, a lot of queue right now. And as I said, they are going through a process. Employers have to complete a 5-hour, like almost a day training. So most of them are on it. So the list will just keep growing, keep growing, keep going to the city website to check if your employer is on the list of designated employers. So it's only when your employer is on that list that your employer will be able to apply for your RCIP application. If your employer has not gone through the process and procedures, sadly, your employer would not be able to apply for RCIP. They have to be designated. So, and also just to add, so this time, RCIP is kind of different from RNIP. So during RNIP, applicants had the access to the city to put in the application themselves. But with the RCIP program, everything is going through your employer. So once your document is ready, you have to send it to your employer. Your employer will have to upload the document themselves. So basically, it's more employer focused than as opposed to applicant, employer filling the form, giving it to applicant submitting no. So this time, everything is just through your employer. So for RCIP, you need a genuine job offer. So how did IRCC defines a genuine job offer as an employment located in a designated community. So it has to be within the 14 community, which Sault Ste. Marie is one of them, and at least 75% of your work you perform have to be in Sault Ste. Marie. Because think of RCIP as an economic pathway. So we're not just gaining from the applicant, the city is also gaining from the employers having to do their job in the Sault. So it's like a win on both sides. And then the boundaries, you have to be, as an employer, you have to be within the boundaries of Sault Ste. Marie. And can you see my screen? The boundaries?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So the boundaries right now, these are the boundaries of Sault Ste. Marie. And you see the farthest is going to is Echo Bay. So this was recently updated because the last RNIP didn't go there, but they've shifted to Echo Bay to accommodate Springer airspace aircraft. So these are the boundaries of Sault Ste. Marie, basically. So even Gole, where is Gole? Gole is outside of Sault Ste. Marie. So if your job is in Gole Bay, sadly, it's outside the boundary of Sault Ste. Marie. Yeah, look at Gole Bay here, so it's outside. So for your employer to get designated, they have to email the labor force at city Sault Ste. Marie SSM.on.ca, and then they will begin the process and get designated. Your job must be non-seasonal. So it's not a job that, okay, you're 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You're on in the winter, you're off in the summer. You're on the summer, you're off in the winter. No, it has to be a full-time throughout the year. IRCC defines a full-time job as 30 hours per week, at least 30 hours per week. So even if you're working 40 hours or 35 hours, that 5 hours does not matter to IRCC. The 10 hours doesn't matter. They just count 30 hours per week. And if you calculate 30 times 52 weeks in a year, that's where you have the 1,560 hours in a year, which IRCC is expecting you to have. So for work experience, so if you are not exempted from the work experience, you need to have the continuous work experience, as I said, the 1,560 hours, which must have been gotten in a full-time job, no break in between the jobs. Like you didn't leave one job, you did one job 6 months, and then after 2 weeks, you went to another job. No, it has to be continuous, so no break between each job. And it's counted for the last 3 years. So we're looking at 2025. So last 3 years will be 2022. We're looking at 2022 to now. So if you have experience even outside of Canada or inside of Canada, that will also count towards your PR. And then they have to be a tier alignment. So tier alignment is that if your job is tier 0, so managerial role, your tier category whereby you can bring experience from. So let's say you had experience in your home country, you can bring experience from tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. If your tier category is tier 1, so registered nurse, you can bring in experience from tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. If your tier is tier 2, the same thing. So there's a way it aligns. So if you're on tier 2, you cannot bring in experience from tier 0 because tier 0 is way above. If you're in tier 3, you can only bring in experience from tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4. And then if you are tier 5, you can only bring in category from tier 5 because tier 5 jobs are considered like low skilled jobs. Maybe you just need secondary school or even none or something like that. So you can only transfer experience in tier 5. So let's say you were, what job will I say? Construction helper. Now your current job is a construction helper, which is tier 5. And back home, you worked as a nurse or PSW, which is tier 3. You cannot transfer that job to this tier 5 job, like it doesn't align. So those who are exempted from work experience are international graduates, so people who schooled in Sault Ste. Marie, not anywhere in Canada, Sault Ste. Marie, either Algoma or Sault College. Those are the 2 designated learning institutions we have here. And then they must have completed a full-time program. Be mindful, full-time. So you have to obey all your study permit conditions, and the program must be at least 2 years and above. For those who have done doctoral, so Agloma U right now has some master's program. So if you've done a master's program, let's say computer science, that is less than 1 year, you would still be exempted so far as a master's program. And then you must have graduated in the last 18 months. So this 18 months is calculated based on the date on your diploma. So your degree you get after convocation. That is so it will say you graduated May 17, 2023. So that's the day the city will start counting from that day. So, and then when you were doing this program, it's not distance learning. You have to be in community for at least 16 months in Sault Ste. Marie. The applicants, so there's also an exemption. So applicants with 1 year nursing experience can bring in their experience, let's say, they are nurses in Sault Ste. Marie, and back home they were PSW. They can bring in their work experience. So for nurses, there is an exemption. So if you see the tier alignment, for tier 1, a registered nurse fall under tier 1, but they are saying they can't bring in tier 4, right? But for nurses, they are exempted. They can bring in tier 4. So far, they have had like 1 year nursing experience and they have done these jobs they can bring in. So there is an exemption for nursing applicants.
Sorry, they don't need a work
education,
experience in these
RCIP is
cases?
usually for nursing.
They don't need work experience
Is it
in
for
these
nursing?
both cases?
Is it for nursing, or what are you asking for?
So I don't get it. So if it's an international graduate or an applicant with 1 year nursing experience, they don't need work experience to apply?
Okay, I'm just going to explain it, but if you have question, you have to keep your question to the end, then we'll do question, but I'm just going to explain
All
it
right,
since
sorry.
Yeah, no problem. It's all good. So I'll take it again. For international graduate, if you school in Sault Ste. Marie, so either Algoma or Sault College, and your program was 2 years and above, right? That's 24 months. You will be exempted. So far, you've graduated in the last 18 months. So 18 months, as I said, starts reading from your degree. If you had your degree last year, you are exempted. If you had your degree in 2022, you would not be exempted because it's past 18 months. So you just have to do the calculation to know if your degree is still within 18 months. And then when you did your program, you stayed 6 months in community. So this is an exemption. They say applicants with 1 year nursing experience. So if you have a 1 year nursing experience, let's say you had a 1 year nursing experience in the Philippines, and then you move to Canada and then you get a job, because most times immigrants, when we come here, we don't get a job in the field we've worked like back home, right? We get lower most times. So let's say you were a nurse in the Philippines and you come to Sault Ste. Marie and you ended up being a PSW, which is tier 3. What they are saying is that your 1 year nursing experience, even though it falls under tier 1, you would still be exempted, like it's going to go. So when you look at the tier, registered nurse falls under tier 1. But let's say you work tier 1 back home and then you're working tier 4. You see, tier 1, you can't bring in experience from tier 1 here because tier 1 is way higher. But there's an exemption for nurses because we all know we need nurses in Canada. They are saying if they worked as a nurse in their home country, they can still bring in their experience in this tier. So far, they are doing like a PSW job, which is far below. Are you clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So education, as I was saying, RCIP kind of is asking for the bare minimum compared to other pathways. So applicants just need to have secondary school education. Immigrant most times come with higher, come with bachelor, come with masters. And if you have a foreign degree, whether high school, bachelor, masters, you have to get it evaluated. And then your evaluation. So if you've done evaluation, and it must be within the last 5 years. So if your evaluation has expired, that's your education credential assessment, ECA, you need to get a new one because they're just looking at the validity for 5 years. And here are the places where you can do your evaluation. So they're about about 6. West is the commonest people use, so you can just check them out, check the link, know the processing time, and apply to get your credentials evaluated. So language. Regarding language too, RCIP is still on the low side. So for occupation in tier 0 or tier 1, you need a CLB 6 or NCLC 6, which is the French equivalent. RCIP is open to both English and French, so it doesn't matter which language you show, all is eligible. If you have a job in tier 2 or 3, you need CLB 5. If you have a job in tier 4 or 5, you need CLB 4. And then this category is looked per aspect, so it's not the band. So for those who did IELTS, CLB, where you have band 9, you can have a band 9, but if you have the if your score in a particular area is less than 4 or less than 5, depending on your tier, you are still not eligible regardless of your band. So I'm just going to briefly show you the conversion table. So for CELPIP is straightforward. If you have it, CLB 4 is a 444 across board. For IELTS, that's where the conversion table applies. So if you have a CLB 4, for you to get a CLB 4, you need to have 3.5, 4. You see, it's not static, it's changing, right? 3.5 here, 4, 4.5, 4.0. So you have to make sure that if you are in tier 2 or 3 where you need a CLB 5, you have to make sure in reading you have nothing less than 4.5, writing nothing less than 5.0, listening nothing less than 5.0, and speaking nothing less than 5.0. If you have a 3.5 in reading, for example, and your tier is a tier 2 or 3 job, sadly, you would have to take your test again because you would not be eligible. And so PTE core is also different grading system. This is TEF, this is for the French. So you have to look at the grading system and know how to convert it to fit your CLB and for your tier. So ties to community. For this RCIP, they have not really a scoring grid. The only one I've seen so far is Thunder Bay that have a scoring grid, and they do have point for ties to community because it just makes sense, because RCIP is a way to show that you are connected to your community. They are not looking for people that they will give recommendation to, and tomorrow they are just, off the road in Vancouver or anywhere, right? They want them to stay in Sault Ste. Marie. So if you have an immediate family member, sibling, child who is a permanent resident or PR, please include it in your application. It just strengthens your application. Extended family, grandma, cousin, the general belief is that people kind of, when you have pull factor in a place, you want to stay in a place, right? Like you don't want to leave. If I don't have any friend, any community in Sault Ste. Marie, I would have long gone, right? But When you've built all these pull factors, it makes you want to stay and call that place your home, so which they are looking for. So some people may not have family, they may not have extended family, but who can also be your family or friends? It could be community organizations, like, you volunteer, you build relationship with people. So get involved, get active, volunteer in your organization, volunteer in your cultural group, your religious group, and get those letters from those groups to attest that you are active, and then put it in your application. It just shows, okay, you are in SU, you are active, and you want to stay in the SU. So this is the last, I don't know if it's the active, but this, oops, where did I go to? So just a little bit back. I can't click the link anyways. So just volunteer, get active, and there's always a point for ties to community. As I said, for the RCIP, they haven't released the scoring system. The link I had on the slide was the last RNIP, which of course is not active right now because it's been updated, right? So make sure you are active to claim that point of being involved in community. So when you receive a recommendation, what's next? You can apply for PR. So this is the federal stage, right? You're applying directly to IRCC portal. Once the city hands your employer the recommendation, now it's left for you to go and apply for PR. The recommendation certificate is only valid for 6 months. After 6 months, it becomes useless. And please, as I stated earlier, we have 300 slots. Right now, if a slot is wasted, that means we have 299 slots. So IRCC is not compensating for a recommendation that is expired. I have seen people recommendation expire. So don't think that you have time. Start getting your police report ready, start getting your reference letter ready. So when you get your application, you can just apply for PR as soon as possible. So when you've applied for PR, if your work permit is expiring, I know a lot of people are in that position right now whereby their work permit is expiring. Once you've gotten a recommendation from the city, you can apply for a closed work permit. It's also called employer-specific work permit. How that work permit is processed is that it's a two-way street. So your employer will have to pay $230. It's not an LMIA. It's an employer works specific permit. So the employer will pay $230 on the employer portal, and then he's going to get an A number, and then which is like 7 digits, right? And then with that number, the employer is going to give you that number, and then you will now go on IRCC portal to apply for a work permit. So this work permit is valid for 2 years. As we know, the fastest pathway to PR is express entry, which is processed within 3 to 6 months. But when you talk about non-express entry pathway, including provincial programs, usually 18 months, 24 months, that's usually the timeline. You can get it before then, but that's just the standard processing timeline on IRCC website. So this work permit is valid for 2 years, and it's going to lead you till you get your PR. And then settlement funds. I know these are virtual sessions, so people are joining like across the globe. I'm just going to talk about this. If you're looking at moving to Sault Ste. Marie and you're outside of Canada, you would need settlement funds. So for a family of 1, you need to have 7,963, and just follow the table, right? A family of 2, you have to have 9,000 and whatever. So if you're more than 7, for each additional family member, just add 1,869. So this is the breakdown IRCC has done. So you just base it off your family size and have that money in your account. If you are in Sault Ste. Marie in Canada, you're working, you have a valid job offer, you don't need to prove settlement funds. You are exempted because you're already in Canada, you are settled. Why do you need settlement funds? But those people applying from outside of Canada, because RCIP is open for those in Canada and outside Canada, you need to prove to IRCC that when you come to Canada, you wouldn't be a liability, you can take care of yourself, find your footing and all of that. So you will need this. And please, don't just flash the money in your account. Make sure, because most times when IRCC, they are finalizing application, they do ask for your bank statement. So make sure that money is there. I've seen application get refused because of IRCC dying minute to ask for, okay, we are finalizing your documents. Can you send us your proof of funds again? And the person does not have the money in your account. So your application could be rejected because it's also a requirement. And then After you've gotten the letter can still be revoked. Getting the letter is just halfway step, right? You're just halfway the road. But then if by any means you decide to change your employer, or you decide to just, take your bags one day and say, I'm leaving Sault Ste. Marie, then your certificate can be revoked. And now I just want to let you know that RCIP is employer specific. So the employer already has this connection with the city. So be mindful. You just have to stay with your employer, except maybe situation outside of your country. So let's say, for example, now you work with Agloma Steel. We all know currently Agloma Steel have been laying off staff because of the whole tariff thing. So if it's not your fault and you were laid off, that's a different thing, because you're going to have documentation that, oh, they asked you to, leave your job and all. But if you just decide to voluntarily, take your bag and change employer, then that certificate can be revoked. So this is all about community Sault Ste. Marie. So now when you're applying for the Federal Express Entry, I just want you to know that they will cross-check everything you claim you have. So when you say you had work experience, you are exempted. They need to see your degree to be sure that you were really exempted from having that work experience. If you say you have work experience back home, they need to be sure that that work experience is valid, is not just faked. So as consultants, this is in the Immigration Act, and this is misrepresentation, which is Section 40. This is a situation whereby you withhold material facts from the visa officer, which could induce error in him assessing your application. So, for example, saying if you've been denied visa and you say you've not been denied visa, that's misrepresentation. Or claiming a NOC code you're not working in, just lying indirectly or directly. So this was a case early this year that happened, and this was she was applying for the Federal Skilled Worker Program. This is a client from Nigeria. It's, mind you, it's an open source. So when you go to the Canly website, you can check on it. So she claimed an experience in the NOC code and claimed an experience working for Delta Bakery 2025 and 2026. And IRCC decided to open an investigation. So when they opened, in conclusion, this is the note of the officer. The subject does not work for the bakery, and no company with the name of Timotech Integrated Services in Nigeria found around the vicinity. The letter of employment record and reference letter for Kelechi Blessing Agbayi is forgery. The presenter of this letter should be made to face the full wrath of the law. So IRCC does check. Don't think this is something that happened 2025 to 2026 and they still, did investigation. So just be mindful when you are claiming the point for community, telling them you have work experience, you would need to show that on the federal level so you don't misrepresent yourself. So, and then PGWP. So most people are transitioning from student, PGWP, and then applying for RCIP. Just a few points regarding PGWP. You have to apply within 180 days after you've graduated. Once your study permit expires, you have 90 days left to apply for study permit. And then also, you have 90 days to apply for PGWP and restore your status as a student, because when your study permit expires, you don't have a status, right? So you have to restore your status as a student and then apply for PGWP. And then just be mindful the changes that came into effect January 21st, 2025, whereby spousal open work permit became restricted to some tiers. Make sure that you fall under this category. So spousal open work permit for PGWP is people with tier 0 or tier 1, they can apply. And then IRCC has selected some tier 2, and these are the NOCS. So make sure your NOC is here. If your NOC is not here, look for alternative measure to keep your partner in status, so he's not out of, or she is not out of status. And then if you are in tier 3, you can just check to be sure your NOC is there. If it's not there and your partner's work permit is expiring, make sure you convert them to study permit. No, not study permit, sorry, visitors. Convert them to visitor. That way they are not out of status. And then when you get the job, you can include them in your application. So you need to have a job before you can include your spouse in it. So how can we help you? We offer full representation for RCIP. We do both community recommendations, so we support employers, given that employers have to put in the application, and we also do the final peer application. If you decide to do the DIY application, we could also help you, look over it, be that third eye to make sure you have your right NOC code and make sure everything is correct. And we have a flexible payment plan, and currently we have a 50% off PGWP for applicants and their dependents. And as Angela rightly mentioned, we are verified consultants. It's just easy to check. You can go to the college website and search our names. So if I type my last name, it's going to pop, and then you can see my status. Or if I type that of Angela Verzosa, oops, is it a Z before the O? Okay, yeah, if I type Angela, yeah, it's going to also pop. So we are regulated, and be sure that you are in good hands so we can walk you through your journey. And yeah, that's all for me. So I'm going to pass it to Angela. Angela will give us the second part before we go into question and answer. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. So let me just go ahead and proceed in sharing my screen. Just let me know when you guys can see my screen. Oops. Oops.
Do I need to make you a host? Let me see.
I think can you guys see my screen? No, it's
No.
trying. It's sharing now. Let me just do it again. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. 1 second. It is not. 1 second. Apologize. Try again.
Good. Yep.
Okay, let me just make sure it's not hanging. You know what? I think I'll just do it this way. It's not presenting. There. Okay. All right. So thank you, Mary. So for those who just joined now, my name is Angela Verzosa. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, and I'm also the owner and managing director of AV Immigration and Visa Services Incorporated. So, to give everyone a background of my immigration journey as well, I landed in Canada as a permanent resident. 1 second. as a permanent resident in April of 2016. And I moved to Sault Ste. Marie in February of 2017 and have been living in this beautiful community ever since. I also became a Canadian citizen in February of 2021. So also a quick intro about us at AV Immigration. We do specialize in a variety of pathways to permanent residency that includes caregiver programs, express entry, and provincial nominee programs. Our mission really is to provide clear and tailored strategies to make your immigration goals more a reality. Okay, so whether you're just beginning your immigration journey or you're navigating specific challenges at this point, we'll be very much happy to assist you every step of the way. Okay, so if this is also your first time joining one of the our webinars, to give everyone a context, we're actually speaking to you today from the beautiful community of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, where both my practice and Mary's practice are proudly based. We're located about a 7-hour drive north of Toronto, or just about 30 minutes from the International Bridge connecting us to Michigan in the United States. So for today, I will be covering the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program employer job offer streams. Okay, so why are we covering this specific option for today? So when the I don't know what's going on. 1 second. I got kicked out again. So I don't know what part. 1 second. Let me try to share it again. I think I'll just do it this way because if I try to share it bigger, I think that's when my problem is happening. Okay. So anyway, the reason why we're covering the OINP job offer streams today is because we want to make sure that everyone is provided additional information in the event that your occupation is actually not part of the priority occupation list. Because I know many have anticipated to really participate in the RCIP program. However, we also know, unfortunately, that not everyone can participate given the very limited allocation that's provided to our city this year. And at the same time, the very limited, occupation that's also part of the list. Okay, so we'll talk about the OINP as an extra option. So the OINP employer job offer stream, this is actually designed to bridge Ontario's labor and market needs by attracting skilled workers and international talent. So similar to RCIP, where it's specifically built to address labor shortages, but this time on a provincial level. So this is Ontario, okay? So in Ontario, we have these 3 different streams available. So we have the international student stream, the foreign worker stream, and the in-demand skill stream, which I will be covering in detail in the next few slides. But for now, these are the 3 options that we have. Just before I start, before I start covering the information per stream, I want to give everyone a brief overview of the process that will be happening when you actually try to participate for this program. Okay, so the very first step in participating for OINP is the creation of your expression of interest, or what they call EOI. Okay, so after we've covered all of the key criteria for these key streams, and you've identified that you're qualified, the first step is to create an EOI, or an expression of interest. So once your EOI is created in the OINP portal, your interest is going to be recorded in there. And then you're going to have to wait to get a nomination of intent, or what they call NOI, to participate in the program. So it's very similar to Express Entry, where, you know, if you put in your profile, you are going to be scored based on your language ability, your wage rate, the taxes, the amount of taxes that you paid. However, this time, again, as you've noticed, based on what I just shared with you, the measurements are more focused on an economic contribution versus Express Entry, where it's more focused on the profile of the individual, such as your age factor, your number of years of work experience. So here in OINP, or the Provincial Nomination Program for Ontario, there's other factors that's being considered. So if you're one of those candidates or clients that's worried that, you know, your age is already up there, you're not getting points, you're at a disadvantage, we encourage you to have a look at the OINP job offer stream to see if you qualify, and then maybe you can participate. Okay. So we'll talk about the first stream, which is the OINP job offer international student stream. Okay. So for the international student stream, what's great about this specific stream is that there's no requirement for work experience, which can sometimes mean a lot, because, you know, as we all know, if you came to Canada as a student, any work experiences gained as a student is not considered a relevant work experience in immigration. However, you know, as soon as you graduate, or you finish or completed your program, then you can start earning those valuable work experience. But it may take some time before you can actually gain it and then be able to participate with the other programs. That's why this program is great, because the main qualification that they're actually looking at is the program that you have completed. So no specific work experience required. However, if you have 6 months total work experience, you'll get extra points for it. The only requirement for the international student stream is, one, you need to have a full-time permanent job offer in a high-skilled occupation. So it should be in tiers 0, 1, 2, or 3. And then you have to have your based on your location and your wage, you need to be at meeting at least the low wage level specific to that specific occupation. Okay. And then in terms of the programs, it has to be in an eligible Canadian institution, and at least 50% of it must be completed in Canada. Again, no work experience required. And at the same time, it has to be a qualifying program. So it could be a 2-year diploma program, or a graduate certificate program that could qualify for it. Okay. The second one is the foreign worker stream. So with the foreign worker stream, this one will require work experience to submit an expression of interest. So that's the key difference between the foreign worker stream and the international student stream. So with the international student stream, for as long as your program is qualified, you graduate and then you get a full-time job offer. There's no wait time. For as long as it's high skilled and you meet the low wage requirement, then you can submit an expression of interest. With the foreign worker stream option, you need to have at least a total of 2 years work experience. Now, what's key in here is the 2 years work experience. You can actually use your work experience gained or obtained in the last 5 years, whether that work experience was gained in Canada or abroad. So which means, say for example, you're an experienced nurse from outside Canada, and then you came to Canada as a student. and then you are working in later on you got a job offer, so say that you did your conversion and all as a nurse, then if you already have over 2 years experience outside Canada, and that experience was gained in the last 5 years. You don't need to wait for an extra 2 more years before you can participate. You just need to make sure that, again, you have a full-time job offer from your employer. And then another key difference here is you need to make sure that your wage rate meets the median wage rate requirement for that specific occupation in the region where you're working. Okay. And then other than that, so here it's just the 2 years and all that. And then the third one is the OINP in-demand skill stream. So with the in-demand skill stream, this specific OINP job offer stream is actually targeting those specific occupations that are low skilled in tiers 4 or 5. Now, not all tier 4 or 5 occupations are actually qualified for this specific stream. There is a specific list of tier 4 and 5 occupation that can qualify. So you can visit the OINP in-demand skill stream website, and you'll find that there's a complete list of specific NOCs that qualifies for this job. So it means not all tier 4 and 5 has to be part of the list. And also, be very careful when you're actually reviewing, because there are some tier 4 or 5 occupation that would only qualify if you are outside the Toronto area and you have those jobs. So meaning even if you have those tier 4 or 5 occupation, but if you live within the Toronto area, you will still not qualify. So just make sure you cross-check that list, okay? Now, the difference in terms of the criteria for the in-demand, for the in-demand skill stream, a total of 9 months work experience is required that must have been gained in the last 3 years. So this one, again, 9 months or total work experience. Also, another item to take note of is the wage level required. It's also median wage level, similar to the foreign worker stream. And then, yep, so 9 months work experience, cumulative in the last months, 3 years. And then this one is just an extra information about the in-demand skill stream. So in terms of the language skills, you're required to have at least a minimum of CLB4 to actually qualify to participate. However, just take note that for the in-demand skill stream, the language attainment does not give you extra points when they actually look at your overall profile. It only helps to pre-qualify you to participate in the submission of the expression of interest, as compared to the foreign worker stream and the international student stream, where if you put in your language score, each ability will be scored. So meaning if you get a CLB5 for a specific language, this is going to be your score. And then whatever is your language scoring, you'll get a specific scoring for it. And then I believe the system would read all that and would only get the lowest. So meaning similar to the example I think that was stated earlier, even if you have CLB 9, 10, 11, but if you have like a CLB 4, then CLB 4 is the one that's going to be rated in terms of the OINP. Okay. Employer requirements. So the information that we've covered so far are applicant requirements, meaning how you would qualify to participate. However, for you to participate in the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, your employer must also meet certain requirements for their support to be valid. Okay, so employer support is needed for all OINP submission. Now, when we say support, again, this is not LMIA, because some misinterpret and say, oh, you know what, my employer does not support any of that. They don't like LMIA. So when we say support, the support that's needed for the employer is their participation in the process. Because what's going to happen is, so say if you submit an expression of interest and then later on you get a nomination of intent, once you get that nomination of intent, the next step is for you as an applicant to submit all of the required documents to Ontario to prove that all of the information that you've claimed during the expression of interest submission were all accurate and true. Now, part of that process is for your employer to actually fill out what we call an employer form, where they would put down information about the nature of their business, the number of employees that they have, all that information, the number of full-time and permanent employees that they have that's Canadian and permanent resident is going to be part of that. So if they must be willing to participate in that process, because that's a requirement. If you're not able to submit an employer form as part of the nomination, then your application will be refused at that stage. So you don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure that your employer is onboarded. And with all of the clients that I'm supporting, in the event that they're participating in the OINP job offer stream, I always advise that, the earlier you have a conversation with your employer about your intentions, about your willingness to permanently reside in Ontario and participate in this provincial nomination program, the better. Just so when you get the nomination, you will not have issues in terms of securing the needed support, specifically them filling out and participating for the employer form part. Okay. So what are the requirements for the employer? Okay, so first, one of the requirement is they must be have an active business for at least 3 years in the province of Ontario. Okay, so this is a key requirement. Of course, Ontario does not want to entertain endorsement from employers that are considered pop-up employers, where they set up their business just so they can provide support to some PR aspirants that would like to move forward. And also, Ontario would want to make sure that your employer have significant contribution in the province of Ontario to make sure that they have the right to actually put forward your name and provide support for you as an endorsement to the Ontario to become permanent resident. Okay, so must be within Ontario, of course. No compliance violation in terms of the ESA, or the Employment Standards Act, and the OHSA, or the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Okay, so job offer must meet all outline criteria to qualify. So again, it must be full-time, permanent, non-seasonal for it to be a valid job offer. In terms of revenue, there's also a requirement. So if you are in Sault Ste. Marie, then you are in a non-GTA based area. So it means the requirement is for your employer to have at least $500,000 minimum gross annual revenue. And then for those those employers within the GTA area must have a minimum gross annual revenue of at least $1 million for their support to be considered valid. Okay. Now, the full-time employer requirements is also another thing. Inside the GTA area, the employer must have 5 full-time employees that are Canadian citizens or permanent residents, and then outside at least 3 full-time employees. All right, so what's next? So now, once you have identified if you're eligible as an applicant and your employer is actually willing to provide support for you, we definitely recommend that you prepare all of the needed documents, such as your language results, any education credential assessment for international education that you've gained, employer reference letters specifically for those work experience that would be providing support for your application. And then again, earlier I said this already, engage your employer, confirm that they qualify if you're unsure, and make sure that you have that conversation so you can get their support well in advance. I've seen a lot of clients, have very clients that are very disappointed when they get the nomination and the employer was actually not willing to provide support at that stage, because it's key at that point, and then it's going to be a waste if we're not going to be able to move forward because we don't have the employer support. Now, a lot of people would also ask, okay, what's going to happen if outright my employer just said, they're not willing to support you. Okay. So you have to make that decision whether, you have other options to consider. Because again, ultimately, your goal is to become a permanent resident. And if your employer is actually not able to provide you support and say OINP or RCIP, these are the only options that you have, and they're not willing to put your name out there, then maybe you'll have to find a different employer that would be more supportive. I know it's a little harsh to hear that. However, reality is the- most of the people's time in Canada for foreign worker are actually on a limited time. Um, you have your work permit, your permit expiration, and you don't want to be placed in a situation where, you've waited too long to make that decision, and then you're gonna be all stressed because you're now at the last leg remaining months of your permit, and you still don't have an option for a permanent residency pathway. Okay. So other suggestions, of course, if you're qualified, go ahead and create your expression of interest. So you can start waiting for that nomination. And then here, as you know, you can always contact us to help you guys out to learn more about the services and how we can help you. So this is just a quick snapshot of the services that we provide. So we do permanent residency end to end as well. We do spousal sponsorship, and then we also have do it yourself or DIY package where we can provide assistance in case you want to get more involved. Okay, so I think that's everything that I have at this point. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and then maybe we can start um, opening the floor for any questions that you guys might have. Maybe I can start looking at the chat if there are any questions here. So let's see. So for the 1,560 hours experience can be from Quebec. We arrive in February. Where can I find information about whether my business is eligible? So the work experience that's being asked here is for RCIP and the OINP streams. Yes, Quebec is in Canada, so that work experience can be considered relevant for as long as, again, if it's RCIP, it's obtained in the last 3 years. And then for OINP, for foreign worker stream, obtained in the last 5 years. In-demand skill stream obtained in the last 3 years. So depending on the type of program, there might be some limitation in terms of the timeline on when that 1 year work experience was gained. However, it can definitely be considered and added. Let's see.
And just to add, right, even if your work experience is also back home, so far is within 3 years is still very much valid. It doesn't have to be within Canada. It could also be in your home country as well.
So there's one question here. If you have ties to community with a community recommendation, you don't need work experience to apply.
You want me to?
So
Okay.
go ahead, Mary.
Okay. So for ties, those are two different things. They are two different requirements. Ties does not substitute work experience. For every economic pathway IRCC offers, you have to have work experience except for the international graduates, whereby you're just graduating, so you don't need work experience. But for Canadian experience class, RCIP, you need to have that 1,560 hours. Where you need your community recommendation, so your ties to community, is when you're applying for RCIPs. RCIP is Sault Ste. Marie Focus Rural Community. So you're telling them you want to stay in that community to get the community recommendation. So there are two separate requirements.
Um, so there's another question, I think, follow up, Mary. What do you mean employer support the services you offer? And please explain cost and what is included in your full service.
Okay. So for employee support, regarding RCIP, as I made mention, RNIP applicants could submit the application, so the city could have a conversation with you, send me this document, you can send them this document, but right now everything is going through your employer. You have no communication with the city. And we all know most times employers are not really knowledgeable about, immigration forms, how to go about the procedure. So if your employer ever needs help navigating how to fill the forms, or how to put in the application, or they don't just have time, most employers don't have the capacity to handle RCIP on top of their workload. So we also offer that employer support. So that is like, having those consultation sessions with your employer and working them through the process, and even helping them submit at the end of the day. For my fee, I'm going to drop my email, and then I can email you my fee. So yeah.
Yeah. So I know that that's services for Ubuntu. So we also have something similar at AV Immigration, very similar to the approach where, with RCIP, either you do a full package for permanent residency where, it's going to start from the employer assistance up until the processing of the permanent residency. And then just the employer assistance, meaning coaching, assistance on the actual submission. Because remember, the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Program is a two-stage process. There's the first stage is the employer submitting to the city to get the certificate of recommendation. And then once the certificate of recommendation is obtained, then the second stage will happen, which is the submission to the IRCC, which is the permanent residency. Okay. OINP, how many years experience needed? Is it eligible to apply even? I just got a job offer starting this May. So Jennifer, yes, for as long as you're a student. So it depends on the program that you finished. If you have like a 2-year diploma, a graduate certificate or a postgraduate certificate, that can qualify you for the international student stream. And then just like what we said, for as long as the job offer is high skilled, meaning tier 0, 1, 2, or 3, it doesn't even need to be an occupation that's related to the program that you've finished. But it just needs to be tier 0, 1, 2, 3, and at least a low wage rate in terms of the wages to qualify. And then you can go ahead and create an expression of interest right away, no work experience requirement. But if you have a relevant work experience, like at least a 6 months work experience, you're gonna get an extra points for that. But it's not required.
Um, Miss Angela, follow-up question with
Yes.
that. This is Jennifer though. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
already have submitted a profile for OINP under international student. However, okay, I left my job at Toronto for 9 months. Same job that I got at Sault Ste. Marie. Can I
Mm-hmm.
still update my profile having that 9 jobs experience, or what do you think? Because I'm confused.
There's so Miss Jennifer, there's two questions there, right? So when you create an
Yes.
expression of interest, there's one asking you for the total work experience in the current job offer, and then
Yeah,
total work experience for the occupation. So the total work experience for the occupation you can add, but then for the current
it should
employer,
be 0.
it should be back to 0 since you're starting
Oh
again.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's my confusion though. But yeah, that's one thing, that's the only question that I got for OINP international student. but I withdraw my profile as well for job offer stream because I got lot of confusion. But anyhow,
Mm,
yeah, I will update my
yeah.
profile and resub. Can I still resubmit it since there's no nomination yet?
Yes, for sure. You can always resubmit. And and I actually encourage you to go ahead and resubmit as soon as possible because as we know, right now there's
Mm,
no drawings yet
invite
that
yet.
happen. So you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
miss out, right? So if you can
Yes.
resubmit it right away, Miss Jennifer, that will be awesome. That's my recommendation as well.
Yeah, because um fortunately the points got increased right away. Will get increased because the location of the job offer
Yes.
is already in Sault Ste. Marie. Yeah,
Yes, for sure.
that's another factor that I can consider. And then okay, since I have you on the phone, all right. The employer is willing to support me with RCIP. However, my NOC is not listed. Can the employer still request the RCIP community to for me to be eligible or to recommend me?
For RCIP, so again, there's no we like typically if the occupation is not on the list,
Yeah.
the probability of it being screened and accepted by the city is gonna be fairly low. And the reason behind that is
Yeah, I
we only have
understand.
very limited allocation this year, and they have published the list of priority occupation because they feel that these
Okay.
are the occupation that they want to support this year. However, of course, there's no harm in trying if your employer is can advocate you and can justify why.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I don't want you to have your hopes really up
Yeah, I
because
agree.
it's gonna be at the discretion of the city. In
Yeah.
fact, my maybe Mary will have her own thoughts around this, but for me, instead of just submitting the application, even if you know that your occupation is not on the list, maybe the employer should start to advocate first for you why
Yeah.
why your occupation should be in the list. So maybe if
Okay.
they can send a notification to the city to have that conversation started, and
Mm-hmm.
then at some point if they would consider add your occupation, then the probability of you being screened is higher that way than just submitting it without the occupation being in the list. So at least that's my thoughts around it. Mary, I
Okay.
don't know if you want to add anything on that.
I totally agree with what you said. The NOC is growing, and as you know, life is very fluid. Change happens. So what may be a priority 2025 may not be a priority. So I would say your employer can start by advocating if your area is in high demand, and then for next year they can have your knock there. Even since the city updated the list, they have made some changes. So they removed 44010 to 33102. So they've been also tweaking it and making some adjustments. So have your
Okay.
employer start that advocacy, and then let's see where it leads to.
Okay. You guys, would you be able to guide me and my employer as well with that? But yeah, I have spoken about this to them as well. But I'll keep in touch.
Thank you, Miss
Thank you
Jennifer.
so much. Yeah. Thank you.
And then take a look at the list here. Okay, so Kendrick has a question. Do family business qualify for RCIP? If yes, what will be the requirements?
Okay, want me to go?
Go
Okay.
ahead, Mary.
Yeah. For our so your business has to meet certain requirements. If it's a family business, is it registered with CRA? Do you have at least 3 Canadians or permanent residents as workers in the business? Is the business in Sault Ste. Marie? Is 75% of the business done in the Sault? If you meet all those requirements, which are on IRCC website, then you can email the city and then start the process. I'm going to put the email again on the chat, the labor force email, and then you start. But if it's a family business whereby it's just, yourself and your family, no citizen, no PR, just family members, unfortunately, that will not qualify, because even self-employed, like people who are self-employed, they do not qualify, except doctors, right? Like those are the people who are exempted. But even if you're self-employed, you don't qualify for RCIP. So make sure you check the dynamics of your business and then you reach out to the city.
And then I would just add, if you actually go to the website in IRCC, you'll find specific list of employers that are actually not eligible to provide an endorsement. So so pretty much I would say it does not matter if it's family owned or for as long as you meet all of the requirements included in the website. And then the only restriction really is the list that they have provided. I'm trying to pull it up to make sure I can share. So see, for as long as you're not a consulate, you're not a staffing or employment agency, for as long as an employer that a candidate owns or controls, so meaning um the the candidate is not owning at least more than 50% of the majority of the business. An employer that runs a business offering striptease, erotic dance, offers jobs that are not genuine, owes administrative penalties, and a business owned by an authorized immigration representative such as me and Mary. So we're not, these are the businesses that are not allowed to provide endorsement. But so Kendrick, in your question, like having a family business alone does not automatically disqualify you. So for as long as you go through all of the criteria, you meet it, and you're not one of the disqualified employers, I think you should be good. So let me just see what other questions we have. What can you advise for an expiring LMIA work permit with spouse and dependents in North Bay, which is excluded in priority list? Okay, so this is a question where, I think this would require further conversation to try and see other options available. So you can either reach out to myself or Mary if you want to have further conversation around this. But typically in my practice, if we encounter challenges such as this, we do look at the profile of the applicant and the main applicant, or the co-applicant, see if there are any see the profile, see if there are any uh programs available that they could readily qualify for, and they can participate, and then other recommended approach or other programs that we can potentially explore. And then if there's none, of course, we'll take a look at, depending on financial capacity, your goal as a family, you can take a look at other options, such as maybe if the before the other person was the wife was a student, this time around maybe consider if the husband would like to study to extend your stay. Or again, finding the most obvious one is finding another LMIA employer that can provide support. But given that this is a family, I imagine we have to look for an occupation that is part of the list that was released last January 21st. I believe my friend here, Mary, provided a quick overview of the list of the tier 0, 1, 2, 3, or tier 2 and 3 occupation that are qualified to apply or include a spouse open work permit as part of it. And then again, worst case scenario, Mary did mention this earlier as well. While still trying to figure out for other option, converting into a visitor record might be an option, because again, you don't want to lose status in Canada if there's really nothing left to do. Okay.
Mhm.
This one's been answered. Were the majority of employers in SSM informed by the city government that the RCIP program must be initiated and submitted by the employers, or should the employee inform or request the employer? You want to take that, Mary?
Okay. So regarding RCIP, right? The city did reach out to different employers in the Sioux based on their database from those who participated in the last RNIP. They had info sessions. IRCC themselves came here. That was sometime in March, and they had also meetings with employers and they had meetings with applicants. So I would say the outreach has been done, and it's based on those outreach that we have the priority NOCS and sectors. But then if your employer doesn't know, you can still go ahead to inform the employer. Make sure you let them know it's not LMIA, because most times when you talk about immigration, employer just think of, LMIA and it's expensive. If you need to share the website, you can share the website with them, refer them to the city page. Also, Sue today has posted a lot of articles regarding RCIP. So pretty much I think like everything has been done, as I said, the outreach. But if your employer still doesn't know, still wants further information, reach out to us. We're more than happy to explain to your employer how the process works and then walk your employer through it.
Yep. Let's see. For this process, we need to create a profile for the express entry pool. Is this for the OINP, Sebastian? It's trying to understand this question. Maybe this is for, so the
So if
OI, go ahead, Mary.
like, I don't know if he's talking about RCIP, but then I just wanted to
Yeah.
explain that RCIP is different. So RCIP is community. So when you talk about immigration program, we have federal level where express entry, you need to create an express entry profile for that to participate. And express entry is divided into three. So you have the Canadian Experience class, Federal Skilled Worker Program, Federal Skilled Trade Program. So when you create your profile, you have to fit into one of those class. Sometimes you fit into all two. If you have foreign experience, if you have a trade license or trade background, you can fit into like the trade. But then if you're talking about RCIP, no, you don't need a profile. And I'm going to pass it to Angela to talk about provincial if you need a profile.
Yeah. So for OINP, you need to go to the OINP portal. And then once you're there, that's how you're going to submit your expression of interest. So similar to like a creation of an express entry profile, you'll be provided with series of questions about yourself, your passport biographic information, your work experience, your language, studies, wage rate, the highest amount of tax that you've paid in the last 5 years, when your work permit is going to expire, all those information, where you're located. Because again, OINP is also heavy with geographical location, meaning if your job offer is located in the GTA area, you're actually going to get 0 in terms of points. But then if you're here in Sault Ste. Marie in the Northern Ontario, you'll get 10 points for just working here. So again, that's a profile. So if you're talking about that, yes, indeed, you need to create a profile so you can participate in the pool for nomination. I am in healthcare, included in priority as OWP, however, in a part-time position. Is there a chance for a part-timer that gained 1560 hours in Canada with experience outside of 5 years to apply for RCIP, or is it needed to be a full-time here? So the first one, let's tackle the first question first because I think these two are different. So the first one, you're working in, like, the occupation is in the list, but then you're working part-time. Okay. So ideally, working full-time would strengthen the application. However, specifically if you're transitioning from being a student to post-grad work permit, you're not actually expected to have full-time work because based on your authorization in terms of the permit, you're not even allowed to work full-time, right? So if you have part-time and you're, say, in the process of applying for post-grad work permit, part-time is okay. However, on my end, my recommendation is, say, if you're in an environment or a type of work where there's an opportunity for full-time, or your employer probably committed that they'll offer or extend a full-time employment after you've submitted your post-grad work permit, I believe, and I always recommend this to my clients, to include a conditional job offer as part of the PGWP application, because that strengthens the application. And then once the application is submitted, maybe after 2-3 months that you've been a full time, you can request for a new employer reference letter and attach your pay statements and resubmit that via web form to add to your application to make it more solid. So that's my thought on that. Mary, you have anything to add there?
I think you said everything right. So for the spousal open work permit, right? IRCC never mentioned if you need full or part-time. So you're good. As Angela said, it's tricky to have a full-time job, right? You're just graduating. So they know that too. You're good to apply for PGWP.
Yeah. And then the second question, is there a chance for a part-timer that gained 1,560 hours in Canada with experience outside of 5 years to apply for RCIP, or it is needed to be a full-time here? So again, this one I think is very straightforward. You have to have full-time permanent job offers. So I think this one's non-negotiable, unfortunately. If you don't have a job offer that meets the criteria, um, you will be refused on a city level. Like we won't even get through city recommendation. So it's not advisable to move forward if you have a part-time position.
I think he's talking about the work experience, if I'm understanding the question right? Like for the work experience, you can have part-time. So far, you have that accumulated within 2 years. So let's say if you're doing part-time, IRCC count 30 hours per week. So you're working 15 hours per week. So far, that 15 hours, you've done it in 2 years, that can still count. If you have work experience outside of Canada in the last 3 years, so you say you have 5 years, I don't know when this 5 years was, whether it's 2020. If it's 2023, it's good because you can count experience in the last 3 years. So for work experience, it's either you're meeting it full-time or part-time. But now the job offer, what Angela was saying, has to be full-time permanent.
So hopefully one of us got that question correctly. the the other question here, my husband is working in NOC 72201, but his employer is not listed. What can we do? Okay, we need to force we need to start forcing the employer to register. No.
Yeah.
So I think, because again, the rule, Victoria, is also strict, right? IRCC actually imposed this new change in the process where an applicant cannot submit their application unless it's through the employer, and unless the employer is actually a designated employer. Because what it means when an employer is actually a designated employer is they've been screened by the city, meaning they met all of the criteria that our friend Mary mentioned here earlier about, being in the business for 2 years, having 75% of their operations within the city area, all that wonderful criteria has been met. And at the same time that they have went through those two required training that needs to be accomplished. So if they're not designated, then unfortunately they will your husband will not be able to move forward with his application. So I think the first step here is to have a conversation with your employer, to make sure that they understand how this is important for your husband, and ask them to help you out because you want to reside here in the Sioux or wherever you are, whatever participating community that you're in. and then to encourage them to sign up. Because remember, there are a lot of intakes that's going to be happening throughout the year. So if they're not able to complete their designation this time around, I believe the first intake will end May 10. The next one will happen or will start on May 25th. So there's still time to really convince and talk to them.
And
Okay.
also, the list is growing, just to add, right? You said
Yeah.
what?
No, go ahead.
I said the list is growing too. Like you see, Sioux Area Hospital is not even there, a whole Sioux Area Hospital, right? So your employer could just be in the process, just give it time. As I said, every day, just go to the city website and check. Today they updated like 2 or 3 there. So the list just keeps growing. And then they are going through the process. So
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, awesome. I think that is the all of the questions that have been published. So anything else from anyone? If you have any live questions you want to ask,
I do have one question to ask.
go ahead.
So I just want to ask that I'm working in the retail, like at Dollar Tree, a full-time position. So is this eligible? It will be eligible for RCIP or no? Because there is no knock code for retail, and but they have said in priority list for trade and seller. So I'm just confused in between them.
You want me to answer, Mary?
yeah, go ahead.
So if it's a retail position, okay, not just retail, but any other occupation, for as long as it's not in the priority occupation list released by the city, unfortunately, the probability of the endorsement being approved is very low because, again, we've discussed this that we have very little allocation for support for RCIP here in the Sioux. We only have a 300 allocation, and because of that, the city strategically had identified specific NOCs, specific sectors that they will be supporting. So unfortunately, like myself and Mary, we've discussed about this, and we feel that the probability of the city supporting any occupation outside what's listed is very low, unfortunately.
So like anything outside the knock code which they have given will not work. Right.
Yes, unfortunately. For now, for this year, yes, because of the list. So if again, I think a similar question was asked earlier where, what am I going to do about this? And our recommendation is again, if you feel that your position should have been in the list, then I think you need to have a conversation with your employer so your employer can advocate for you, and then your employer can reach out to the city and
Okay.
justify why your position should be part of the list. That way, the city can make that decision because ultimately they're the ones that's going to be deciding whether they would change or improve the list, right? So Mary did mention this earlier as well. Nothing's set on stone here. Everything could change, but again, ultimately the deciding factor is on the city. They're the ones that's going to make that decision. So if your employer can convince them to add your occupation, then it's better that way.
Okay. And so is there any other program like Ontario PNP or whatever in which I can just tell my experience like as a full-time manager or no?
Um, so depending on the number of years of experience that you have, you can take a look at the foreign worker stream, or if you have a qualifying program in Ontario, you can take a look at the international student stream. So we've covered all these programs earlier. I'm not sure if you've attended the entire session,
No,
but yeah.
I haven't attended. So I just completed my degree in Bachelor's of Psychology.
Yeah, so recommendation is for you to double check the 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 program for international student stream if you just recently completed. and you have a high skilled occupation. So Mega, this specific webinar is recorded. We are going to post a copy of it. So we encourage you to watch it fully so you can have a look at the criteria for the other programs, okay?
Okay, so you will be posting the link on Instagram or Facebook.
On our Facebook pages.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and what if I want to book consultation with you guys? So I just have to mail or I just have to come there and then you can book for me?
So you can either visit our website or you can email us. So for me, my email address, our email address is info. So maybe Mary and I can put down our email addresses again, the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's mine. And then our website, and then Mary can put in hers in the chat quickly so everyone can also there. So you guys can reach out to us if you need further conversation, okay?
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that is everything I think for today. So great questions.
We have more chat. We have more question on the chat. So
Oh, we do?
yeah, we do.
They multiplied. Okay, let me see. Can a visitor visa holder apply an RCIP, Mary?
I would say yes, because it's also open for people in Canada, but that people outside of Canada as well. But that application will be treated like an outside of Canada application. For the previous RNIP, if you visited any of the, like if you visited Sault Ste. Marie, spent 3 nights, met with at least 2 employers in community, you get about 10 points for that. So this RCIP, I don't know if that is going to be the scoring grid for outside of Canada applicants, because it just shows you want to stay in the Sault. So you came all the way to see how beautiful the Sault is. So if you are a visitor, you can still apply, but just you apply as a outside of Canada applicant.
Okay, awesome. There's a message from Mamta, but just to summarize, I think she's asking if a 1+1 program would qualify for the work experience exemption. And for RCIP, the answer is no. It has to be a 2-year program, so it can't be 1+1. So meaning if you have 1+1, then you need to have at least 1 year work experience gained in the last 3 years, because you also mentioned that you have 3 years of job experience in tier 1, so that's good, from India. If that experience is gained in the last 3 years, you can make use of that. If there's 1 year total, then you're exempted from the work experience requirement as well. Okay. Let's see if there's more. Is there a specific annual income for a family business to qualify to RCIP? I don't believe there's an income published that had to be met. However, you have to be prepared to demonstrate in case that the city would ask for financial documents to prove that the business is genuine, the business have been operating for the past years, to make sure that you're qualified based on all the other criteria that they have listed.
Just to follow up with Manta's last question, and the job, is there a minimum wage requirement? Yes, for RNIP, RCIP, there is a minimum wage requirement which has to be on the job bank. So when you go to the job bank, you have to look at Northeast, depending on your region. Sault Ste. Marie is Northeast. If you're Thunder Bay, is Northwest. And then you have to check, let's say you're a nurse, you have to be making at least the minimum, so the low on the job bank. If your wage applications have been refused in the past, if your wage is not up to the low, so most times the city will reach out to the employer to tell the employer, hey, this person cannot go through, you need to bump up the person's wage, or the applicant will reach out to the employer. But some employers have been responsive so far to, like, just increase $1 or $2 so their applicants can go. It all depends on your employer. Some employer will not, so it all depends. But yes, you have to meet a minimum wage requirement on the job bank. Okay.
It has to be 2 years, a total of 2 years program, not 1+1. So meaning, because you have two programs that totals 2 years. Okay, it has to be one program totaling 2 years.
Mhm.
Is that good, Mamta?
So let's say if
Awesome. And
okay. Okay,
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, it's good. I wanted explaining. If you do a PSW and supply chain, that's 1 year, 1 year. So far, it was not, your admission letter was not 24 months, 2 years. That would not qualify. Technically, we know you did 1 year, 1 year, which is 2. But for RCIP, no, it would not qualify. So yeah.
Yep. And then it's not an automatic disqualification for the whole RCIP, Mamta. Okay, just to be clear, you're just disqualified for the work experience exemption. Okay, but so meaning since you don't meet the 2-year program, you're required to meet at least 1 year work experience to participate in RCIP. Okay. All right. Now this time I think, okay, perfect. So I think that is really everything that we have today. Wonderful. So, great to have everyone today for your active participation. We appreciate that. So Mary and I definitely will have more sessions in the future to host for everyone. Yeah, so Mary, you have any final thoughts, feedback from the group before we go?
Just want to thank you all for listening to us. I know sometimes immigration can be a lot boring with all the rules, requirements, and all. But thank you for being here. I know some people also back in different time zone made it here. So if you need guidance, we're here to support you. You don't have to walk alone through this part. Immigration can be so tricky, and with PR application, any little mistake can lead to rejection, even though it's just like, with your NOC code and all. So please don't come this far to make a mistake. So please reach out if you need professional assistance, and we're more than happy to support you guys.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you again in our next virtual session, okay? Take care and thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.